Welcome to the Operation Draws Down, aka the Big U Rico breakdown. This is part 1, basically the introduction, but it gets into information about Nipsey Hussle that's definitely gonna have you thinking, what's next? Now let's get straight into it. Affidavit. I, Andrew James Rusa, being duly sworn, declare and state as follows. Introduction. I am a special agent and SA with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and have been employed since September 2018. I am currently assigned to a criminal enterprise squad at the Orange County Resident Agency of the FBI, where I am tasked with investigating violent gangs and organized criminal enterprises. From March 2019, month and date when Nipsey died, RIP, through December 2024, when I am joined with the Orange County Resident Agency, I was assigned to the Los Angeles Field Office investigating violent gangs and organized criminal enterprises, in conjunction with the Los Angeles Metropolitan Task Force on Violent Gangs, the LAMTFVG, a multi-agency federal, state, and local gang task force. My experience as an SA with the FBI includes, but is not limited to, conducting physical surveillance, executing search and arrest warrants, working with informants, issuing subpoenas, analyzing pen register and trap and trace records, interviewing subjects and witnesses, consensually monitored meetings and telephone calls, analyzing financial records, and conducting court-authorized interception of wire communication. I have received training in the investigation of violations of federal law, including racketeering laws and federal drug conspiracy laws, and have personally participated in and assisted with several gang investigations involving racketeering and drug conspiracies. Purpose of affidavit. This affidavit is made in support of a criminal complaint and arrest warrants for Eugene Henley Jr., also known as Big U, aka Draws, aka Hannibal, aka Hannibal Muhammad, aka Anybody Killer, aka David Austin, Sylvester Robinson, aka Vay, and Mark Martin, aka Bear Claw, for a violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1962D, racketeer influence and corrupt organizations conspiracy, to remain Ashley Williams, aka Loose Cannon, for a violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1951A, interference with commerce by robbery, Armani Afliji, aka Mani, for a violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 2421A, transportation of an individual in interstate commerce with the intent that the individual engage in prostitution, and Frederick Blayton Jr. and Tiffany Shankira Hines for a violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 13441, bank fraud. The facts set forth in this affidavit are based upon my personal observations, my training and experience, and information obtained from various law enforcement personnel and witnesses. This affidavit is intended to show merely that there is sufficient probable cause for the requested complaint and warrants, and does not purport to set forth all of my knowledge of or investigation into this matter, unless specifically indicated otherwise. All conversations and statements described in this affidavit are related in substance and in part only. All amounts are approximate, and all dates and times are on or about those indicated. The person's property and premises to be searched. This affidavit is also made in support of warrants to search the following: person of Henley, as described in attachment A1, a black 2021 Mercedes, and believed to be used by Henley, registered to Henley, bearing California license plate 8UTW346 Henley Mercedes, as described in attachment A2. Henley's residence at 4159 West 62nd Street, Los Angeles, California 90043. Henley's 62nd Street premises, as described in attachment A3. Henley's residence at 5847 Arlington Avenue, Los Angeles, California 90043. 90043. Henley's Arlington premises, as described in attachment A4. The person of Robinson, as described in attachment A5. Robinson's residence at 17720 Superior Street, Unit 111, Northridge, California, 91325. Robinson's premises, as described in attachment A6. The person of Martin, as described in attachment A7. Martin's residence, 3061 South Robertson Boulevard Apartment 5, Los Angeles, California, 90034. Martin's premises, as described in attachment A8. And the business of the Ex-Offender Fellowship Network, doing business as Developing Options and other names Developing Options, located at 544 Crenshaw Boulevard, Suites 202 and 203, Los Angeles, California, 90034, Developing Options premises, as described in Attachment A9. Attachment A1 through A9 are incorporated herein by reference. Items to be seized. The items to be seized from Henley, Henley's Mercedes, Henley's 62nd premises, and Henley's Arlington's premises are evidence, fruits, and instrumentalities of violations of 18 U.S.C. Section 1962D, racketeer influenced and corrupt organizations conspiracy, 18 U.S.C. Section 1962C, unlawful debt collection, 1951A, conspiracy to interference, and attempted interference with commerce by robbery and extortion. 924C, use of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence. 2421A, transportation of an individual in interstate commerce with the intent that the individual engage in prostitution. 1343, wire fraud. 666A, 1A, embezzlement, conversion, and intentional misapplication of funds from organization receiving federal funds. 1344, bank fraud. 1014, false statement to a financial institution. 7201, attempt to evade or defeat income tax. 7203, willful failure to file tax return. And 18, obstruction of justice. Henley's subject offenses, as described in attachment B1, which is incorporated herein by reference. The items to be seized from Robinson's premises, Martin, and Martin's premises are evidence, fruits, and instrumentalities of violations 1962D, racketeer influenced and corrupt organization, conspiracy to interference, and attempted interference with commerce by robbery and extortion. 924C, use of a firearm in furtherance of a crime of violence. 18, obstruction of justice. Robinson's and Martin's subject offenses, as described in attachment B2, which is incorporated herein by reference. The items to be seized from Developing Options premises are evidence, fruits, and instrumentalities of violations of 1962D, racketeer influence and corrupt organizations conspiracy. 1343, wire fraud. 1951A, conspiracy to interference, and attempted interference with commerce by extortion. 6661A1, embezzlement, conversion, and intentional misapplication of funds from organization receiving federal funds. 1344, bank fraud. 1014, false statement to a financial institution. 26 USC S 1014, 7201, attempt to evade or defeat income tax, and 7203, willful failure to file tax return. Developing Options subject offenses, as described in attachment B3, which is incorporated herein by reference. The summary of investigation. In February 2021, the FBI Los Angeles Metropolitan Task Force, the LAMTFVG, launched an investigation into Henley's criminal enterprise, the Big U Enterprise, and its association with the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crip Street Gang, the Rolling 60s, which the LAMTFVG began investigating in August 2020. The Big U Enterprise is a mafia-like organization that utilizes Henley's stature and long-standing association with Rolling 60s and other street gangs to intimidate business businesses and individuals in Los Angeles. The Big U enterprise is led by Henley. Henley is a self-admitted member and an original gangster, or OG, of the Rolling 60s, a violent criminal street gang of associated sets in several other states. Henley is widely regarded as a leader within the Rolling 60s. In the 1980s, Henley rose to prominent position in the Los Angeles drug and Rolling 60s hierarchies. During this time, Henley also earned a reputation as an enforcer for the Rolling 60s. Some members of the Big U enterprise are also members of the Rolling 60s. Henley is able to lead the Big U enterprise because of his standing as the face of the Rolling 60s for decades and his reputation for violence, including murder. On a side note, in interviews, Henley has stated that he believes his story is the modern-day mafia story. At times, the Big U enterprise partners with members and associates of the Rolling 60s and other criminal elements for mutual benefit. The Big U enterprise is a distinct and independent criminal enterprise engaged in criminal activity. Members and associates of the Big U enterprise are engaged to illegal activities including extortion, robbery, murder, human trafficking, wire fraud, bank fraud, other financial crimes, obstruction of justice, illegal debt collection, illegal gambling, conspiracy to commit fraud via illegal gambling, and other offenses is furtherance of the Big U enterprise and for the benefits of its members and associates. As set forth in detail below, through the course of investigation, agents gathered information from a variety of sources, including confidential human sources, surreptitious recordings, including Title III wiretaps, search warrants for social media, iCloud, and Google accounts, financial records from both individuals and companies or organizations, toll records showing communication between conspirators, victims, and Big U enterprise members and associates, cell site location information from numerous phones, including Henley's, Robinson's, and Martin's, City of Los Angeles records, public filings, and other publicly available information, and interviews of witnesses and victims. The investigations employed various additional investigative techniques, including surveillance, vehicle tracking, poll cameras, recording devices, interaction with confidential sources, and information gleaned through undercover purchases of firearms and narcotics. The United States District Court for Central District of California authorized multiple Title III wire and electronic interception orders for telephones being used by certain subjects of the investigation, including Henley, Robinson, Martin, and Zaire Mitchell, aka Bricc Baby. The court also authorized the interception, audio and visual, nonverbal conduct via closed-circuit television, CCTV, through the installation of video and audio bugs in the location. Since the inception of this investigation, the FBI, Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, Criminal Investigation, the IRSCI, United States Attorney Office for the Central District of California, North Las Vegas Police Department, the Los Angeles Police Department, and other local agencies have interviewed more than 50 individuals, including subjects of investigations, who agreed to voluntarily provide information as discussed further below. Based on information learned from these individuals and other sources, the FBI SAs, special agents, the IRS CISAs, the NLVPD detectives, and the LAPD detectives requested and obtained additional search warrants and subpoenas. Below, I summarize the information and evidence obtained thus far from these various investigative tools. On another side note, Mitchell is the subject of a separate sealed indictment pending in case number 225-CR-0132 In certain points below, I summarize wire and electronic communication that investigators intercepted pursuant to court orders. In other points, I quote from or paraphrase agents' understanding of those interceptions were relevant to the requested complaint and warrants. The investigation remains ongoing. Summary of probable cause. Henley, Robinson, and Martin, and others known and unknown, are members of the Big U Enterprise, a criminal organization whose members and associates engage in, among other things, murder, kidnapping, robbery, extortion, interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution, bank fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The Big U Enterprise operates within the Central District of California and elsewhere. The Big U Enterprise, including its leaders, members, and associates, constituted an enterprise as defined by Title 18, United States Code, Section 19614. That is, a group of individuals associated, in fact, that engaged in and the activities of which affected interstate and foreign commerce. The Big U Enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members and associates function as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the purpose of the Big U Enterprise. The purpose of the Big U Enterprise includes, but are not limited to, the following: enriching Big U Enterprise members and associates by using the power and the status of the Big U Enterprise, and Henley as the original gangster in the rolling 60s to commit extortion, fraud, and other crimes, promoting, protecting, and expanding the power, reputation, and profits of the Big U Enterprise and its members and associates through the use of intimidation, fear, violence, threats of violence, assaults, extortion, and murder, using social media platforms, documentaries, podcasts, interviews, and Henley's reputation and the status to create fame for and stoke fear of the Big U Enterprise and its members and associates, financially enriching the Big U Enterprise members and associates by defrauding donors to nonprofit entities under the control of the Big U Enterprise and its members and associates, including developing options, financially enriching Big U Enterprise members and associates by defrauding federal, state, and local agencies the awarded grants and other financial support to nonprofit entities under the control of the Big U Enterprise and its members and associates, including developing options, financially enriching Big U Enterprise by defrauding mortgage lending businesses to make loans to employees of the entities under the control of Big U Enterprise and its members and associates, including Unique Music Entertainment, and developing options, gratifying Big U Enterprise members and associates by trafficking and exploiting sex workers, and concealing and protecting the illegal activities of the Big U Enterprise and its members and associates from the detection of law enforcement through means that included, among other things, witness tampering and obstruction of justice, beginning no later than 2010 and continuing to the present. In Los Angeles County, within the Central District of California, and elsewhere, Henley, Robinson, and Martin, each being a person employed by and associated with the Big U Enterprise, an enterprise engaged in and the activities of which affected interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly and intentionally conspire to violate Title 18 United States Code Section 1962C to conduct and participate directly and indirectly in the conduct of the affairs of the Big U Enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, as that term is defined in Title 18 United States Code Section 19611 and 19615, which pattern of racketeering consisted of multiple acts involving murder, kidnapping, chargeable under the Nevada Revised Statutes, robbery, extortion, chargeable under California Penal Code, multiple acts indictable under wire fraud, financial institution fraud, and relating to interference with commerce, robbery, or extortion, and relating to interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution. It was further part of the conspiracy that Henley, Robinson, and Martin agreed that a conspirator will commit at least 2 acts of racketeering activity in the conduct of the affairs of the Big U enterprise. Henley, Robinson, Martin, and other members and associates of the Big U enterprise conducted and participated in the conduct of the affairs of the Big U enterprise through the following means and methods, among others. Members and associates of the Big U enterprise committed, conspired, attempted, and threatened to commit acts of violence, including murder, armed assaults, robberies, extortions, acts of intimidation, and threats of violence to generate income, an atmosphere of fear, protect and expand the Big U enterprise's reputation for violence, and expand the Big U enterprise's criminal operations. Members and associates of the Big U enterprise used Henley's history and reputation, including his connections to the violent Rolling 60 street gang, to tout to the Big U enterprise's reputation for violence and that the Big U enterprise controlled Los Angeles. As part of the Big U enterprise purported control of Los Angeles, individuals including professional athletes, musicians, and others intending to conduct certain types of business in Los Angeles, including both legitimate and illicit criminal conduct, were required to check in with Henley prior to traveling to Los Angeles or engaging in certain activities to obtain protection from the Big U enterprise while in Los Angeles. Henley hosted a podcast titled Checking In, the opening theme song of which explained, when you hop off the plane, check in. Penthouse suite, check in. When your feet hit the street, check in. Cause if not, it's get hot, check in. You better check in. The check-in included both a payment to Big U enterprise as well as requesting permission for Henley to conduct certain activities, including acts of violence that were sanctioned by the Big U enterprise, as Henley described in a documentary film that he produced about his life titled Hip Hop Uncovered. If I didn't pick up the phone, that can mean death for somebody. As Henley stated in the Nothing to Something podcast, you gonna check in, you could choose not to, and it's gonna be a problem. You choose not to check in, you suffer the consequences. On a side note, based on my training and experience, I know that members of Crip affiliated gangs do not use the letters CK together because members of the rival blood affiliated gangs use CK to refer to Crip killer. Therefore, Crip gang members often replace CK with CC. You feel like you got something bigger than what's there, and that not checking in is basically an act of war. It ain't one human being who not gonna check in. While members and associates of the Big U enterprise used Henley's and Big U enterprise history and reputation to control Los Angeles through violence, fear, and intimidation, Henley simultaneously attempted to create an air of legitimacy for the Big U enterprise by promoting himself as a reformed gang member focused on bettering his community. Purported non-profit organizations he founded, such as Developing Options, and soliciting donations from celebrities and grants from the government and foundations to these charitable organizations. In actuality, Henley and other members and associates of the Big U enterprise used these purported non-profit entities to enrich and further the objective of the Big U enterprise, including by embezzling funds meant as charitable donations to the nonprofit entities, using the nonprofit entities to fraudulently apply for government assistance and loans, and using the nonprofit entities to falsify employment and financial records to personally benefit members and associates of the Big U enterprise. Members and associates of the Big U enterprise would discipline other members and associates, acted in ways seen as detrimental to the Big U enterprise, or other individuals who were seen as disrespecting the Big U enterprise or its members, including acts of violence such as assaults, kidnapping, and murder. Members and associates of the Big U enterprise will avoid detection by law enforcement by, among other activities, attempting to thwart and evade law enforcement surveillance, destroying video surveillance, or other evidence, and threatening or otherwise pressuring victims or witnesses of crimes committed by members and associates of the Big U enterprise to avoid interaction with or to provide untruthful statements or testimony to law enforcement officers. In sum, there is probable cause to believe that, in furtherance of the Big U enterprise, Henley kidnapped and murdered victim R.W. in retaliation for perceived disrespect to the Big U enterprise, and endeavored to conceal the murder with other Big U enterprise members and associates. Henley, Robinson, Martin, and Williams committed and arranged robberies to enrich the Big U enterprise, further the extortions committed by the Big U enterprise, and to create the impression of the Big U enterprise controlled Los Angeles. Henley, Robinson, and Martin extorted individuals in Los Angeles for purported protection, when such protection was actually violence committed by the Big U enterprise itself. Henley and Affidavit arranged for the interstate transportation of individuals to engage in prostitution for Henley and Big U enterprise members. Henley defrauded various companies, donors, and athletes and celebrities into providing donations to Big U enterprise charities, only to transfer these donations to his own personal bank account for personal use. Henley fraudulently obtained funding from the city of Los Angeles' mayors through the Gang Reduction Youth Development Foundation, the GRYD program, portions of which received federal funding. Henley defrauded and attempted to defraud the Small Business Association, the SBA, for loans that benefited the Big U enterprise. To enrich Blanton, a Big U enterprise associate who purported to work for the Big U enterprise charitable organization, Henley, Martin, and Blanton and Hines committed bank fraud by submitting a fraudulent mortgage application, and Henley, Robinson, and Martin and other members and associates of the Big U enterprise attempted to obstruct investigations into and conceal the above referenced crimes committed on behalf of the Big U enterprise. Statement of probable cause. Unless otherwise noted below, my knowledge of the facts summarized herein is based on my training and experience, my discussion with other investigators, my review of law enforcement reports, search warrants and subpoenas returned, Title III wiretap interceptions, public domain interviews to include YouTube and podcast interviews and docuseries, electronics and other written communication, interviews of certain individuals, and City of Los Angeles records and other publicly available documents. Big U enterprise. As discussed herein, I believe that Henley led the Big U enterprise. Robinson was a years-long associate and confidant of Henley and served as his right-hand man, underboss, and enforcer in the Big U enterprise. And Martin was also a close confidant and trusted lieutenant of Henley in the Big U enterprise. Much of the Big U enterprise structure and affiliation with the Rolling 60s is in the public domain. In the television series Hip Hop Uncovered, the docuseries, which Henley executive produced, Henley detailed the history of the Rolling 60s and his involvement with the gang. Henley admitted he was a Rolling 60s member from the first generation. Henley advised that the Rolling 60s was a large Crip gang known to instill fear in the community. Henley claimed that he did not have gang-related tattoos because people already knew where he was from, and it was never a question. A similar quote that Henley often repeated when asked why he has no gang tattoos. On a side note, based on my training, experience, and participation in this investigation, this statement corroborates precisely how the Big U enterprise works to this day. Henley uses fear and his prominent association with the gang to further the Big U enterprise's racketeering and profit from the same. Is that it isn't on you, it's in you. After encountering legal troubles as a juvenile, Henley moved from California to Chicago. Henley admitted elsewhere to being on the run and conducting illegal drug activities in Chicago. While Henley was living in Chicago, Henley decided to move back to Los Angeles to participate in the gang war after an associate's murder. Henley noted his mentality was that we're hunting. To us, it wasn't about fighting. It was about guns now. My philosophy was the gun can get you any and everywhere you need to be. After Henley returned to Los Angeles in the 1980s, 1980s, he became known as a fighter for the Rolling 60s by fighting other gang members. As Henley recalled, those fights were about dominating the Rolling 60s competition. Henley remembered he and approximately 200 other Rolling 60s gang members went to a Run DMC concert at the Long Beach Convention Center to establish and maintain their dominance within the Los Angeles Bay Street gang scene. Henley characterized his and the Rolling 60s moral code at that time as get 'em before they get you. Throughout the 1980s, Henley fostered a fierce and earned reputation for violence, including multiple charges for the first-degree murder as well as a charge for attempted murder of a peace officer. According to these statements, Henley believed in 1987 he had cemented his reputation as a tough person that should not be crossed. Henley recounted serving time in the county jail where he would beat up other inmates for the purpose of establishing pecking order. Henley was also earning money through the drug trade in other cities, such as Minneapolis, where he realized he had an influence over other Rolling 60s gang members. When Henley was 22 years old, he claimed to stop selling drugs and transition to a different racket. He believed his moniker, Big U, was so big and ominous. Every time I go through that door, I really was a beast. That was the mentality. Despite having such power within the Rolling 60s, Henley did not have a reliable source of income outside of the drug trade. Henley subsequently connected with the hip-hop artist Kenneth Green, aka Papa LQ, and became his manager. The docuseries Papa LQ recounted that Henley was in tune with both hip-hop artists Ricardo Emmanuel Brown, aka Corrupt, a self-admitted Rolling 60s gang member. In 1991, Henley was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in state prison for robbery. He admitted he was also charged with kidnapping. While Henley was incarcerated, Henley stated maintained contact with Henley and ensured he was kept abreast of developing in the music industry. In 2022, on the podcast Dubsy and Mac Show, Henley described himself as an enforcer in prison and recounted knocking somebody's eyeball out their socket, as well as committed stabbings. 2004, Henley was released from prison. In the docuseries, hip-hop artist Calvin Brodus Jr., aka Snoop Dogg, characterized Henley as institutionalized. You say the wrong thing, you gonna get messed up. He was short-tempered and serious about the stuff he was on. Something about him I liked, cause I felt like he was the leader. Henley claimed that he was focusing on healing his community. When he returned home from prison, according to Henley, his primary objective was to affect change and lift his community to a better place instead of destroying it. Henley's own words through the show the falsity of his claimed reformation. For example, on December 31st, 2022, on an intercepted call, Henley explained his motivation for committing murders on behalf of the Big U enterprise, stating, "What you guys see on the internet, y'all keep hearing other people who don't have nothing to talk about but sell. Let me explain something to you. If I would have had a problem with any man, color, creed, king, or kind, the issue would have been resolved and he wouldn't be here, or I wouldn't be here. It ain't no kid, nothing. And it damn near nobody who been in this longer than me can stand against me and me be who I am. If I had a problem with any man, and this wouldn't be so funny to me. I'm still who they say I am." Similarly, on April 23rd, 2023, on the intercepted call, Henley discussed gang politics with a co-conspirator and stated, "I'm retired activist. I'll pull up on your block right now and show up and show out. That's what happened to the last man that called me retired." According to the docuseries, as Henley transitioned life in Los Angeles following incarceration, he returned to the hip-hop industry. Corrupt connected Henley with Suge Knight, the former chief executive of Death Row Records. Henley recounted that Suge Knight assisted him financially when he was released from prison. Henley referred to himself as the Blue Suge Knight, as Henley, as of 2004, was widely regarded as the leader of the Rolling 60s. Because of this reputation, Henley was well positioned to ultimately form and lead the Big U enterprise. In approximately 2008, Henley formed a relationship with hip-hop Aramis Joseph Asghedom, aka Nipsey Hussle. After several years, Henley temporarily left the industry after he had a falling out with Nipsey Hussle related to the equipment at Henley's shop. Henley recounted in the docuseries that Nipsey Hussle made a diss song about Henley, but that Henley is a scrapper, not a rapper. On a side note, based on my training and experience, I know blue refers to the color associated with the Crip gang in Los Angeles, rather than the blood gangs that Suge Knight associated with. Based on my investigation, I believe that this provides background and corroborates that Big U Enterprises structure. Suge Knight openly hired members for Death Row Records, as Henley hires the Rolling 60s to work for his charities and companies, just as Henley operates on fear and threats. Suge Knight's criminal history is replete with criminal threats of violence and death. Suge Knight is currently incarcerated for purposely driving his car over two men, killing one. In a recent interview, Henley stated that outside of Suge Knight, Henley is the only person who has done more for the community, and that Henley has bailed out Suge Knight and paid for his lawyer. Henley stated after they settled the differences, he picked up Nipsey Hussle one morning so that Nipsey could get disciplined for the diss song. However, Nipsey Hussle's brother intervened and told Henley that Nipsey Hussle was not going anywhere. LAPD documented that violence erupted, and when the LAPD officers arrived on the scene, a firearm was present and discharged. In 2019, Nipsey was murdered by a member of the Rolling 60s.